message tonight, I had an overwhelming burden to sneak a message in before we went back to systematic theology or moved systematic theology to Wednesday nights. I'd like you to go to 1 Samuel chapter 2. This has been the study of the devotion with our family. And the Lord has worked on me and brought so many different messages to my mind for, potentially preaching at conferences, or what messages I was going to preach at the coming conferences that we'll be going to and other places. I brought that message to you guys that Wednesday. We were all sick on Lot Lingered, and the Lord's been working through that. And this is another one. And I've entitled this, When Just Bringing Them Isn't Enough. When just bringing them isn't enough. We're going to read several different passages. And you all know me, I'm a expository preacher for the majority of my preaching. But I'm going to just reveal this to you. I'm just going to preach this tonight as the Lord was allowing me to preach it and read through it and teach it with my kids. So there might be some skimming of some scriptures. There might not be me getting down and saying, like, do you see that word right there, what that word means? This is a one-time message tonight. I'm not going to develop this into a series because I don't have any more services to develop series into. So we're just going to go one tonight. Pick up in 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand. And he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto the Israelites that came thither. Also before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let them not fail to burn that fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young man was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child girded with a linen ephod. I've had this overwhelming thought that being at church isn't enough. Just being here is not enough. You think about Eli, you think about his position in Israel, you think about all that he did, and his sons are there with him. His sons grew up in and around the priestly duties. They grew up in these things. But first they didn't know the Lord. And just being around the tabernacle wasn't enough for them. You see, I think so often about me. I think so often about how going to church for all those years and strolling in on a Wednesday night or a Sunday, just strolling in with my Bible and going and finding my seat and sitting down and just waiting and singing and, waiting to get called on to pray or waiting to get called on to dismiss, occasionally doing this or that around the church. It just made me really think, well, that's exactly what Eli's sons did. But they were sinners. They took advantage. Well, why? We can't just bring our kids to church. We can't just bring them here and expect them. We can't just bring ourselves here and expect us to learn. It takes so much more than that. Eli's sons, they didn't know the Lord. They didn't have that trust in the coming Messiah to separate them from everyone else. We see they're charged with 3 sins in that first passage that I read. They're charged with robbing the people, of their share of the peace offering, not being satisfied with just the part of the peace offering, the breast or the thigh or however it would be. We'll go to Leviticus chapter 7. This just for context. We really almost, I'm not preaching on the sacrifice, so we almost don't need it for the message, but I just would rather read it really quick. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 28. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, He that offereth the sacrifice of his peace offerings unto the Lord shall bring his oblation unto the Lord of the sacrifice of his peace offerings. His own hand shall bring the offerings of the Lord made by fire. The fat with the breast it shall he bring, and the breast may be waved for the wave offering before the Lord. And the priest shall burn the fat upon the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron's and his sons. So right there, before we go any farther, that wave offering was to go towards the priest. They were to take the breast of the sacrifice and separate the fat. The priest got the meat. They were supposed to separate the fat. They didn't want that. When you flip back over and hold your place there in Leviticus chapter 7, when you... I went too far here. Verse 15, it says, Also before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as the soul desireth, then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. These are the priests. These are Eli's sons. This is the representation. I'm not going to get too deep, but keep going in verse 31. And the priest shall burn the fat upon the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron and his sons. And the right shoulder shall ye give it unto the priest for a heave offering of the sacrifices of your peace offerings. He among the sons of Aaron that offereth the blood of the peace offerings and the fat shall have the right shoulder for his part. For the wave breast and the heave shoulder have I taken of the children of Israel from the sacrifices of their peace offerings, and have given them unto Aaron on the priest and unto his sons by the statute forever from among the children of Israel. We see that they robbed of the share of the peace offering. They didn't offer up the fat as they were supposed to. We see that there is the weave offering, the heave offering. It was just the types of meat that as they brought forward, that was how the priests were sustained. But it wasn't good enough for Eli's sons. Well, why wasn't it good enough for Eli's sons? Because they didn't have any respect. They didn't have any respect for God's house. They didn't have any respect for God's people offering up the sacrifices. Listen, you can drag these kids to church all you want. You can put them down here, you can set them in the pew, but if you never look at them and tell them to stop it, or pay attention, or do this, or do that, they're never going to develop any respect. And furthermore, if you don't have any respect, you're surely not going to teach them any respect. And God's house deserves respect. You see, that's where I got just, and maybe y'all are getting a conference message. I don't know how the Lord's leading, but when bringing them isn't just enough, it talks about how much we have to work. You know, I was thinking about Brother Derek's introduction to our newly formed youth group about how, we're doing this to invest. And I was thinking about that after we'd already been into this study a little bit. And bringing our children should be an investment, but bringing ourselves should be even more of an investment. Because you're not going to teach them anything if you're not investing anything in and of yourself. And we see that they robbed the people of their offerings. They demanded, the second sin, as I kind of alluded to it already, they demanded that the fat be offered, the meat before the fat had been offered, which goes against what Leviticus chapter 7 says. Why? Well, what do we all know? I'm getting too far ahead. I'm getting excited. Sorry. The third one is they wanted to roast the meat instead of boiling it. Now, what do we know? Well, I can't do a pork shoulder to save my life. Mess it up every time. Don't know why. I can do brisket. I can do a lot of other things. I don't know if there's not enough. People say there's more fat on a pork shoulder. I can't find it. But when we like to grill and barbecue, we don't want to boil the meat, do we? We want to roast the meat or grill the meat. We don't want to cut the fat off, do we? No, we want the fat to render down to flavor. I mean, you can take the words in the Bible and make them very plain and clear to us as to why Hophni and Phinehas, I believe were their two names, wanted the meat done that way. Because they wanted what they wanted, because they had no respect. Listen, church isn't have it your way. We don't get Burger King's motto of church. You don't get to sit in the pew and live any certain way and have things your way. You don't get to tell the pastor that he needs to do this or needs to do that and have things your way. It doesn't work like that. So just coming in and occupying and being a stale, stiff-necked, bench-warmer Christian, oh, that's not enough. Their sin was great because they treated the offerings of the people with contempt. They never considered the people offering up the offerings, did they? They go, oh, yeah, I want that fat. Not only that, what did they say there in verse 16? You're going to give it to me now, and if you don't, I'm going to take it by force, the whole thing. There was no respect. And see, that's the problem. We've talked so much about churches and how things have happened, or just how I was thinking about what Clark told me the other day. We were talking about the differences and talking about the great harvest of souls. You know, and I'm not going to get into that now. We're both going to smile, I think, because we know that we can have these conversations on the side at times and understand. But you cannot deny the fact that the churches have been shrinking because people have been drifting away for years. You know, Clark and I were talking about this. And I know this is probably going to be, as you all refer, or as I refer to it, the cut your feet off moment. And if it is, it is. But listen, we want our kids, we want to see our kids saved, don't we? We want to see numbers added to the church. We want to see people that we hand out our Bible tracts to come in and visit the church. We want to see all these things happen. But what we don't want to see is our vacation time used to go to a Bible conference. I would love to have a Bible conference here. There's no point in me having a Bible conference if you all haven't been to one in the last 5 years. It's investment. Can you honestly look out and say when enough is enough? When you've invested the time of your family, when you've done enough? Because you never should be able to, but that's why churches are drifting and going away, because they felt like they've done enough. And then when we get to these positions, man, we don't do anything to tell our kids, hey, you don't do that. That's disrespectful to the church. You don't do that. That's disrespectful to the pastor. The most uncomfortable thing for me to be called when I was called as pastor was pastor. Didn't feel worthy. I still don't. But I understand the difference of that. I understand why we do that. And I'm not looking at any of y'all and saying you need to call me pastor. I feel like I'm down here. You know, we go get with some other men. But if you see a pastor of another church, make sure you call them pastor. Make sure you give them respect. Don't ever disrespect them. I don't look at any of you out. I know everybody's probably thinking, well, Madison calls him Johnson. That's our joke. That's okay. I've let Madison, that's our joke. I'm not picking at Madison. Be careful at trying to justify when you've done enough. Eli's sons grew up in the church, did they not? Or in the church setting, in the spiritual place of the time, let's say. Somebody will jump all over me on YouTube because I said Eli's sons grew up in the church. Somebody, but I'm sure. In the temple. They grew up in the temple. Was it enough? Obviously not. You can't just bring your kids to church and expect them to behave. Verse 22. And I have to skip a lot of this, but I really encourage you all to read into these passages. Now Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the woman that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. Eli, so sadly, finally hears the good report, the bad report of his sons. In his late 90s, he now knows what his sons have been doing the whole time. Where was Eli? Where was he at? Why at the end of his life does he see the egregious sins that his sons are causing? We can say that. We can look at Eli and go, where was he at? What was he doing? I mean, there's no phones or TV or sports or things like this to distract at that time. Where was he at? I don't know, but he wasn't there. And it goes back again to the investment, men and women, that you put in your families and your children, that you put in your own walk. Because it's that easy. It's that easy. And it can all be lost. What a shame to be in a position of leadership and your home not be clean. What a shame to be in the position of leadership and you don't know what's going on behind you. Don't get so high and mighty in position in life, in home, that you don't know what's going on with your wife and your children. Eli's sons were at the place of worship committing great sin, dealing with people unjustly. You know, I think about pastors' kids. I've been a preacher's kid my whole life. My dad surrendered to preach in December of 1994. I was born in October of 1993. So pretty much my whole life, I've been a preacher's kid. And then obviously having to live under the shadows of Roger Jones, he's not afraid to make anybody, or not afraid to preach boldly while he lived on this earth. You get used to being placed under the microscope as somebody that's close. There's some of you in the room now that know what it's like to be a preacher's kid. And those kids get looked at, and preachers, scripturally, you have to keep your family in subjection and keep your kids aligned, or keep your kids obedient, or keep your kids to a standard. But you know what? You need to as well. You need to keep your kids to a standard. Understand their age, where they're at, and what they should be doing. There is a time that I learned as a parent, and I'm not pointing a finger, so I'm being very realistic. There is a time when your kids do not need anything to sit through church. And it's far earlier than most of us realize. We had the bright idea. I had the bright idea. No, I had the bright idea. Leo had this cool little yellow backpack. Man, he'd walk into church, Bible, all of his toys. Guess what never left? Bible. All of his toys, there he is. He's in there. They're quiet, though. They didn't make noise. So I thought like I was doing okay. Until I realized that kid is sitting there playing with his toys, and he's listening. So why don't we just have him listen? You can, for you younger parents, or listen, the world's going to give you a bunch of hogwash when it comes to parenting and what you should do and how you should treat your kids. And, just let them make their decisions. I remember one person's like, yeah, do the devotion. Give them some toys, give them some stuff to play with in church. Keep themselves occupied. No, that is wrong. Have a standard and teach them to sit. When did we lose having an expectation for children? We constantly justify and change our own expectations. When did we lose that expectation for our children? No, you will sit. Because listen, any of these kids, as soon as the TV or the favorite movie comes on, they're going to, unless my son Leo, he doesn't sit during a movie. He laughs and jumps all over. But any other ones, they're going to sit and they're going to be quiet. And I don't have to run from here to there to down there to keep your attention. I do it for some reason. I move from side to side. I've gotten used to my C. Wear a mark. Oh, I'm starting to wear a mark out actually. But don't have to be anything crazy to learn and pay attention. Pastors' kids get placed under the microscope. All of our kids need to be placed under the microscope. How embarrassing is it when our kids do something that we're like, oh no, I hope nobody saw that? How incredibly embarrassing is it when they do it in church? So you don't get this blessing, folks. It's a wonderful blessing because your kids normally do something very embarrassing when you're a traveling preacher visiting another church. And you don't get the opportunity to go, they don't do that normally. Like, yes, they do. You don't get to change that. So it's too late for Eli's sons. Are you to that point yet? Is it too late for your kids? My grandfather used to say this, so I take no credit for it. You can't unscramble eggs. If you don't take these kids to church, if you don't get yourself right, if you don't put the effort in, you can't unscramble eggs. Once that cake is baked, once those eggs are made, the product is done. You don't get any more time. You don't get any more chances. You don't get do-overs. And at some point, they're not going to listen to you anyway, so you have to stop talking. So the time is right now. Don't just make this a habit to be here on Wednesday. I hope that you all don't look at tonight. My phone, I was sitting there, I always put my phone in the office. I forgot to put Do Not Disturb on. My watch is just going ding, 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 ding. It's pastors talking about Brother Cummins. So they obviously didn't have church tonight. So please don't look at church tonight as a place of habit. It's a place of worship. It's a place of learning. It's a place of going, Lord, help me, change me. Give me the grace that I need. You can't wait to raise these kids. Just like you can't wait to deal with your own sin. My wife taught me years ago that with our kids, we just need to call sin, sin. No matter how old they are. You did that because of sin. But more importantly, she taught me, I did this because of sin. You don't need some strong facade that you don't sin, that you don't have problems, that you don't deal with anything, because you're not teaching your kids how to deal with the world or sin. God's grace is enough to sustain us in sin. You fall into times of deep sin, of deep difficulties. God's grace is enough to get you through those things. But it's better to explain it. You're going to reach points in your life where you can, as I've said before, you're going to reach those points in your life, and I've told some of you, you can be angry or you can learn. This one breeds bitterness, that anger. This one breeds wisdom. Lord gives you children or somebody that you need to coach or help or give something to down the road. This one's going to go a whole lot farther. Don't start teaching your kids when you think they understand. Make them understand through teaching. You know, the flip of this, and you see, we've kind of been in this theme where we've had a comparison this way to this way. Eli, Samuel. Eli's sons, Samuel. Samuel was weaned from his mother and was taken and offered up for the service of the Lord. You know, we want our kids to get educations as they should. We want them to get jobs as they should. We want them to go to college or trade school or be people of ability. I don't think any of us in this room will ever touch upper class. We'll be closer to lower class. Truth be told. So make sure you put the emphasis on right now. Because the richest thing we can ever show our kids is that God's grace is enough for anything that we have to deal with in life. So why was it too late for Eli's sons? Go to one verse in chapter 3, verse 13. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. I've told y'all, you know, I've made the comment like, hey, these kids aren't special. You're not special. We love each other. We love our kids. We love our church. We love our group. We hurt when our group isn't together. But if you're going to be a helicopter parent that's out there and you know, if Leo's here and I'm just constantly keeping things away from him and I'm not teaching him anything and I'm keeping things back and I'm telling him how good he is and how great he is, that's what he's going to grow up to believe. I can tell him, you're blessed. The Lord's helped you. You're a great kid. I love you. But I don't want to set you up for failure in the world. And I certainly have to do more restraining and guiding than keeping people away and letting him know he's okay. He's fine. I remember, thank the Lord for my dad. One of my friends and going through school, you know, some of you may know it, some of you may not. Go to public school. We go to this small, well, it's not really small. My graduating class was like 180 something, so we were a pretty big school. We're in sports, and it was always the political game, right? Like, oh, you played because you don't have the right name, or you have the right name and you don't, and that there was always the things. And I played sports till I got hurt. One of my good friends had zero athleticism, but it was never his fault. No ability to be an athlete, but it was never his fault. His dad was always at the coach. He was always at these people. You know, he was special. And he grew up to think he was special, along with a lot of other kids that I was kind of close and around, and they're struggling to get through life at this point. I'm not talking even the spiritual sense, folks. I'm talking the practical sense of your responsibility to raise your kids. We love the smiles. And I look around at, I got Hayden that smiles at me 3 seconds after I start every time, you know, and I love the smiles. And we got Tatum saying hi, and I love the kids. I can't wait to see these kids grow up. Lord willing, I'll get to see all these kids grow up. You know, and it's a wonderful thing, but I want them to have a healthy respect of God's house, of you, and of God. And I want you to set them up to not fail in this world. Because we're going to be different. And it's okay. And more importantly, you have to restrain them. I've had people I've known closely who their kids never did anything wrong. Never. It was never their fault, never did anything wrong. They do anything for them. They go make a mistake. They never tell them they made a mistake. The mistake was always somebody else's fault. They never point to sin and say, this is your fault. You did this for yourself. It's, oh no, did you see how that person treated you? That's why that happened. Not teaching them anything. You have to restrain them. Kids, if you're old enough to hear what I'm saying, you shouldn't just always be okay with what your parents may be doing to you. Go stand in the corner. I like it when, and I don't try to pick on him, but I love it when Clark tells me stories of what his dad would make him do. It gives me ideas for later, because I've got a hard-headed little boy too. And I think of some of the things that I've had to do. It's okay. Parents, I encourage you. It's okay. These little ones, when they get to the point, the number one thing that they're going to do, it'll be 8 months to a year and a half. You know what they're going to do? You're going to sit down in that pew, they're going to start crying. As soon as you pop up and you round the pew, they stop crying. They've already learned that they can get up. Go sit down. Make them be quiet. Handle them and teach them. Don't continue to coddle them. I'm not saying they don't need to be fed. They don't need a diaper change. You will know as a parent, all of a sudden, it's there. I was terrible at it. You know why I was terrible at it? Because that church in Wauseon had a TV on the wall. So I'd take Leo out there and I'd watch the TV. I'd listen in earshot, but I wasn't really listening. I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't getting fed, and in turn, it hurt my family. It hurt me. And that's not the way it should be. You got to be here. Just being in the building isn't enough. Just sitting in those church pews isn't enough. You got to be paying attention. Don't be afraid to deal with the sin of your children. Eli should have dealt with his sons. Those boys should have been put to death. Put to death. We're going to read something else here in just a second. Or go down to verse 27 of chapter 2. And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer up mine altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? And did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel? Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice, and at mine offering which I have commanded in mine habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people. Wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith, Be it far from me. For them that honor me will I honor, and they that despise shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are come that I will cut off thine arm, and the arm of thy father's house, and there shall not be an old man in the house. And thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation, and all the wealth which God shall give Israel, and there shall not be an old man in the house forever. And the man of thine whom I shall not cut off from and the man of thine, whom I shall not cut off from mine altar, shall be to consume thy eyes and grieve thine heart. And all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee, that shall come upon thy two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they shall die, both of them. And I will raise me up a faithful priest. That would hurt. I'll raise me up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left in thine house shall come and crouch to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and shall say, Put me, I pray thee, in one of the priest's offices, that I may eat a piece of bread. We see the promise of the death of Eli's sons. Listen, if you had some sort of a heads up of the death of your children, would you act different? Going to a Bible conference is not what I mean. But let me ask you a question. If you knew you were dying, if you knew your children were dying, how are you going to get yourself ready? Are you going to spend your time on a lavish vacation to Europe? Or are you going to go get yourself to a Bible conference where you can be fed? Something to think about. See, we can have all the services we want here, but where's our effort? Now, I say that with the caveat of half of you drive an hour to get here. And that's much appreciated. But where's the foundation? Where does that lie? Can you imagine watching your children die? Can you imagine watching your children die and not knowing the Lord? Knowing that you restrained them not? Knowing that you didn't teach them? Can you imagine watching your children die, knowing you gave them everything they wanted, anytime they wanted it, however they wanted it, with all the spoil in the world, and you did not teach them the gospel or restraint? Letting them go anywhere to anyone. Lastly, go to chapter 4. Pick up in verse 11. We're going to close this out. And the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. I just think about that. And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army, and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes rent and with earth upon his head. And when he came in, lo, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. And when Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, What meaneth the noise of this tumult? And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army. I fled today out of the army. And he said, What is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been a great slaughter among the people. And thy two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake. And he died, for he was an old man and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. And his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child, near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark of God was taken, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the women that stood by her said unto her, Fear not, for thou hast borne a son. But she answered not, neither did she regard it. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, The glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, The glory is departed from Israel, for the ark of God is taken. Why was that ark of the covenant there in the first place? Because in verse 4 it says, And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. Not only did Eli lose his two sons, How many men did they lose? How many men were killed against the Philistines? They lost the Ark of the Covenant. Made me think of Phinehas' wife. You know, Phinehas' little baby grew up without a mommy and a daddy because Eli didn't restrain his sons. 30,000, I believe, right? Wasn't it 30,000 men? Am I thinking right? Wasn't it 30? Didn't I read that? Yeah. What's that? Verse 10, that's right. 30,000 footmen. Think they had families? See, we don't get down to the part where we go, man, we have a really important task at hand. And if we don't raise our children right, if we don't put everything into serving the Lord and bringing these children up that are a gift from God, boy, the results can be catastrophic. And it could just take one of us. Remember, we were talking about being just in our dealings. One sinner, what could one sinner do? It could wreck a lot. We could look at Eli, we could say, man, he was the bad guy. He didn't restrain his sons. He didn't deal with them justly. We can point fingers, but you know what? This world has become all about the kids. Giving them everything they want, whenever they want, however they want. Giving them over to whoever they want. Vacations planned around the kids. Work is planned around the kids. I'm not talking about planning around your 2 and 3 and 6 and 8-year-old that you can only go so far like us without one getting car sick. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about planning your life around your kids, not planning your life around the Lord. There is nothing wrong with telling them no. My kids crack me up because I remember when they say it, I remember it. But Dad, I'm bored. Good. I'm glad you're bored. You can do something with that. You don't have to be occupied all the time. You can sit in your little thoughts and be bored. I had somebody complaining, I guess, yesterday because their DVD player got messed up in their van because we did an update to the radio that we shouldn't have done, and it was a mistake. But we did it, and it didn't work. And the gal that came and visited church with us during our revival was on the phone, I guess, with this person, and the mother's in the back going, I don't know why it won't work, sweetie, but we're going to get it. Look out the window. Kids, I love you. Parents, I love you, but we have a great work to do. We have a great responsibility ahead of us. And that time, that window is just so incredibly short. Just coming into church is not going to be enough. Make sure you go home, you open your Bibles. You listen to some preaching. You watch what comes in your ears. You watch what comes in your mind. And kids, have some patience. And some of you, I hope I'll get through. I hope I'm not the pastor that you always just go, oh, Brother Austin's saying get over yourself again. I hope you remember things like you can be angry and bitter, or you can learn and get wisdom. Life is an adventure. And that's just that. I am going to start doing invitations again. I felt Sunday night that I should have done one after the fact, and I thought, it's not Armenian to do invitations. We come to church, and the Lord gives us the opportunity to walk a church aisle if something needs to be done or handled. or if we just need to ask for prayer. And I hope we see the power of prayer. So, Brother Derek, you come.